Hello and welcome. I'm going to explain to you why Half-Life 3 is going to be released fairly soon, within the year I imagine, and give you my reasons. This is going to be quite a comprehensive video covering all topics from Half-Life to other Valve games and Valve as a company themselves. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, stick around. If you're not, piss off. Before we start, a word of caution. I did predict this last year, and I was completely wrong. So listening to me is the equivalent of listening to a fanatical doomsday cult discuss the end of the world. So take everything I say with a pinch of salt. So Valve recently released Source 2 in the form of Dota development tools. Now I say release Source 2, I mean it hasn't actually been 100% confirmed by them, but it's all over the code, and it's exactly what we expected from Source 2. 64-bit, updated, better performance, better graphics, and especially the better editor tools. The new Hammer engine looks amazing, and it looks incredibly easy to use. To realize why Source 2 is important, you have to go back into the history archives of Valve themselves. Historically, every Source update and engine update has been accompanied with a game. And this time, not so much. Dota 2's already released. If they were to release it for Dota 2, it would be still a pretty minor update. 2 years ago, Source 2 was pretty much confirmed by Gabe Newell in an interview with a load of people visiting from 4chan. And he outright said that pretty much finished with Source 2 and they're looking for a game to ship or finishing a game off or something. So what we're looking at is an impending game release. But I don't think Valve is just going to release one game. And if they do release one game, it's going to be Left 4 Dead 3, which will disappoint a lot of people. So what I think they're waiting for is they're waiting to build up enough games to make a 3-box set. So Half-Life 3, Left 4 Dead 3, and this is an interesting one, Black Mesa would be my third prediction as a game that Valve is working on that is impending release. And when I say Valve is working on it, I really mean the Black Mesa dev team are working on it, but it will be released with Half-Life 3 and Left 4 Dead 3 in some sort of bundle, and that they have access to Source 2 and the new developer tools, and they're just experimenting with giving the new workshop tools to the community so they can trial it without it being confirmed or released to the outside world, which Black Mesa has a history of not doing, which, it's the perfect fit for Valve, I imagine. Alright, so I've made 3 pretty bold predictions there, so I'm going to have to back all of those up. So to start with, I'm going to go through the history of Valve, why they're working on Half-Life 3 and Left 4 Dead 3, why not, say, Portal 3, or Counter-Strike 2, or Dota 3, or whatever it is. So to start with, Valve made their first game, Half-Life 1, in 1998. And after that, people asked, well, what are you working on, Valve? And it was mainly community projects like Day of Defeat, Team Fortress Classic, Counter-Strike, all Golden Source, based on the Half-Life engine kind of games. And then they moved into development for Half-Life 2 straight away. And it wasn't till 2004 when that was released. There were 2 pretty large expansions for Half-Life, but they were both done by Gearbox Studios. And after Half-Life 2, they announced a trilogy of episodes. In Gabe's words, they were experimenting to see whether the episodic thing worked for them. And it turned out it didn't. They made 2 really good episodes to Half-Life, but they took ages to be released, and they weren't that substantial. So I think at some point they decided, and the point was after episode 2 was released, that they didn't want to make another episode. Maybe they were working on episode 3 for some time, but it didn't work out for whatever reason. Opinions changed. They decided it wasn't to the standard that they would like, so they kind of delayed the release, kind of put it on hold, and started working on other games. It's important to remember Valve is not a huge company, but they've got a lot of people and they all work on different projects in what are called cabals. So they split off into different groups and started making different games like Left 4 Dead, Left 4 Dead 2, Portal 2, and Dota 2 and CSGO. But they still could have been working on Half-Life 3 and or Left 4 Dead 3 during that time. So people often say Valve never talk about Half-Life 3 and we don't know whether it's happening or not. But Gabe has pretty clearly outlined some of the problems working on Half-Life 3. And I'll just link you an answer to a podcast question where he kind of discusses Half-Life 3 using Ricochet 2 as a disguise, if you will, for Half-Life 3.
We always have this problem that when we talk about things too far in advance, we end up changing our minds as we're going through and developing stuff. So as we're thinking through the giant story arc, which is Ricochet 2, you might get to a point where you're saying something is surprising us in a positive way and something is surprising us in a negative way. And, you know, we'd like to be super transparent about the future of Ricochet 2. Problem is, we think that the twists and turns that we're going through would probably drive people more crazy than just being silent about it.
So, assuming Ricochet 2 is the code word for Half-Life 3, this pretty much confirms, as we expected, that, you know, Valve has been making some changes when it comes to the development of Half-Life 3. Maybe they went from Episode 3 to Half-Life 3 and they changed their minds on what the story would be, or they decided they wanted to make it bigger or wait for better technology or whatever it was. That they've been working on it for quite a while and just making sure it was as good as we hope it is when it is released. And Valve is definitely no stranger to delaying things until they're perfect. Take, for example, pretty much every game they've released. I mean, Half-Life 2, there was a whole fiasco, and they delayed it a year. Half-Life 1, they delayed it a year. Yeah. Every example you could use. I mean, Dota 2 was in beta for like 2-3 years. Like, it is insane how perfect they get a game before release. So there is absolutely no surprise that we have been waiting this long for it, considering all the other stuff they've been working on as well. So why do I think Half-Life 3 is around the corner? Well, they've started to ramp up hinting about threes. For example, the Bread TF2 video, I can't remember the name of that, but there was a load of sneaky threes they put in there. You know, obviously they're not saying Half-Life 3 confirmed, but, you know, they are hinting to the community that something is around the corner, I imagine. The unreleased hero for Dota 2 that's coming out, Techies, has this voice line in it.
Who said we couldn't count to 3, huh?
So, let's say Half-Life 3 is around the corner. What else are they releasing? So, Left 4 Dead has an interesting history. So, after they finished Half-Life 2 Episode 2 in the orange box, they started working on Left 4 Dead, and that was released within a year or two, I believe. Although, you know, they could have been working on that at the same time as the other games. But they released that, and it was met to quite a bit of success. And they said, well, as an experiment, let's try and release a game within a year. And that's why Left 4 Dead 2 just came out a year later. And people hated that, because people wanted Episode 3 at that point in time. And, I mean, they still do. And then that was the end for the Left 4 Dead series as it is. They still worked on mutations and patches like they have for TF2 and Dota and all their other games. So there certainly isn't a huge community that thinks Left 4 Dead 3 should be Valve's next game. I think Half-Life 3 is probably higher on the priority list of pretty much every Valve fan these days. Although that's not to say people don't want Left 4 Dead 3. I would be happy to play Left 4 Dead 3 and I would enjoy it thoroughly. I enjoyed Left 4 Dead 2 thoroughly. But I think Valve aren't going to make the same mistake twice and release Left 4 Dead 3 before the next Half-Life. It would feel, you know, I think it would sit a bit sour for most people having 3 Left 4 Dead games before Episode 3 or Half-Life 3 was released. So they have to release it in a combo box. And Half-Life 3, Left 4 Dead 3, they've got the box of 3 so far. So what's the third game? And Black Mesa was my prediction, and it is still my prediction 10 minutes later into this video. So why Black Mesa? On the 15th birthday of Half-Life 1, Black Mesa released a press release, as you could say, on their forum, which kind of outlined where they're going with the game and mentioned it's going to be on Steam, as well as the fact that they're not working on Zen, but actually porting it over to a new engine. So what engine could Black Mesa Source possibly be porting Black Mesa to? Now the answer is straight away Source 2. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that Black Mesa is being ported to Source 2 as we speak. And it makes even more sense that Valve have contacted them, given the modding tools that they need to create it, and have been working on Zen and Black Mesa ever since. So by the time Black Mesa is finished, and Left 4 Dead 3 is finished, and Half-Life 3 is finished, which I don't think will be too long, I think they'll be aiming for the release to be within a year, or at least the announcement to be within the year, so maybe late 2015. And I think all 3 games will be ready, and they'll bundle it up in a nice package like Orange Box, and everyone will rejoice and live happily ever after. The end. So thanks for dedicating your time to listening to me talk. If you enjoyed this video, share it with your friends, do what you want with it. If it's more of my voice you're looking for, then you can check out Podcast Confirmed. It's a podcast that I do with a few friends. It's not very good, and we don't talk about Valve as much as I would like. But you're welcome to check it out anyway if you're interested in games and shitty podcasts. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.